To learn faster at any age, you have to understand what's actually happening inside the brain when you're paying attention. Focus isn't just a mental state, it's a biological event. When you enter a state of deep focus, your brain doesn't just passively receive information, it chemically changes. There's a release of specific neurochemicals that signal the brain, this is important, keep this. The two major players are acetylcholine and norepinephrine. Acetylcholine is released from a small group of neurons in the basal forebrain, and it acts like a spotlight. It enhances the signal-to-noise ratio in neural circuits. In other words, it highlights the specific neurons that are active while you're concentrating. It's like putting a yellow highlighter on certain words in a textbook, except in this case, you're highlighting the neurons that are processing the information. That's what makes those circuits eligible for change. Norepinephrine, released from the locus ceruleus in the brainstem, works alongside acetylcholine to heighten alertness. It sharpens attention and helps you suppress irrelevant information. It also increases the brain's readiness to modify its circuitry. This is what we call neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself in response to experience. These chemicals don't just make you feel alert, they are physically preparing the brain for change. But here's the key. This only happens during deep, uninterrupted focus, not mild interest, not half listening while doing something else. Deep focus is when your whole attentional system is aimed at a single target, and the brain knows the difference. If you're distracted, checking your phone, switching tabs, getting interrupted, you reset the chemical cascade. You blunt the signal. The neurons don't get marked. No neuroplasticity, no change. So when people say they're bad at learning, they're often not giving their brain the chance to do what it's designed to do. They're never getting into the neurochemical state that actually allows for learning to occur. You have to treat focus like a skill and protect it like a resource. If you want to learn faster, whether it's a language, an instrument, a new field, set aside time where your only job is to focus deeply. No background noise, no notifications, no multitasking. It usually takes about 10 to 15 minutes of sustained attention to even get those neurochemical systems fully engaged. Once they're activated, the brain becomes a sponge, but only for the information you're focusing on. That's why multitasking kills learning. You're dividing those neurochemical signals across too many targets, so nothing gets properly tagged. The brain is not a general purpose recorder. It's a selective sculptor, and the chisel it uses is focus. When you learn to control your focus, you learn to control the very structure of your brain. This is how you learn faster, not by working harder, but by working smarter in alignment with how your biology is built. Most crucial step in learning that most people skip, not because they're lazy, but because they misunderstand how the brain actually wires in new skills and knowledge. That step is deliberate rest, not more work, not more input, rest. And it's not optional, it's fundamental. Here's why. During deep focus, the brain releases neurochemicals like acetylcholine and norepinephrine, which we've already covered. Those chemicals help highlight which neurons are active and which circuits are eligible for change. But highlighting a circuit is only half the job. For that change to become permanent, for the learning to stick, your brain needs time to literally rewire. And that happens after the focused work, not during it. The brain uses rest periods to perform what's called neural consolidation. This is the process where the temporary patterns of neural activity you created during learning are reactivated and strengthened. In a way, the brain replays what you just practiced over and over, making the connection stronger, more stable, and more efficient. This replay happens in a few specific brain states: quiet wakefulness, non-sleep, deep rest, NSDR, and especially during sleep. But even just taking a short walk with no distractions, closing your eyes and doing nothing for a few minutes, or staring out a window without checking your phone, these all qualify as deliberate rest. They allow the brain to go offline from new input and shift into a background mode where consolidation can occur. There are real-time measurements of this. In rodent studies, researchers can track the exact sequence of neurons that fire while the animal is learning a maze. Then, when the animal rests, just lying still in its cage, the exact same pattern replays, sometimes forward, sometimes backward. That's consolidation. And we know the same thing happens in humans, especially during sleep. This is why spacing your learning with breaks is more effective than cramming. You can hammer away at a skill for 3 hours straight and walk away frustrated. Or you can train hard for 60 to 90 minutes, then step away, and during that downtime, the brain is literally sculpting itself to retain what you practiced. You may feel like you're doing nothing, but beneath the surface, learning is happening at high speed. And there's another layer here. During deliberate rest, your brain also engages the default mode network, which isn't idle at all. It's active in processing, integrating, and even creatively recombining information. That's why insights often show up after you stop working. It's not magic, it's biology. So if you're serious about learning, don't just optimize the effort. Optimize the recovery. Build in periods where you deliberately step away. That's not being inefficient. That's being strategic. Focus marks the circuits. Rest seals them in. Learning doesn't end when the effort stops. That's when the brain takes over. And that's when real transformation begins. There's a myth that focus is just about willpower or discipline, that if you just try harder, you'll stay locked in. But focus isn't just a mental idea. It's a neurochemical state. It's fragile. It's chemical. And when you allow distractions in, even momentarily, you disrupt that state. You don't just lose a few seconds. You lose the entire learning window. Let's break down what's really happening. When you focus, your brain engages a very specific neurochemical cocktail, primarily acetylcholine and norepinephrine. These are not generic feel-good chemicals. They serve a surgical function. They spotlight particular neural circuits that are active while you're engaged in a task. They essentially tag those circuits as important, like putting sticky notes on the parts of your brain that should be strengthened during later consolidation. But here's the part most people miss. This chemical environment is easily disrupted. Every time you check your phone, glance at a notification, or even shift your attention to a background conversation, you reset the system. The brain rapidly redirects those chemicals elsewhere, and the spotlight moves. It's like trying to highlight a paragraph while your hand is shaking. You lose precision, and when that happens, the circuits don't get tagged correctly and learning doesn't occur. Now, you may think it's just a quick check or it's only a 10-second distraction, but that momentary shift costs you more than just time. It takes your brain several minutes to return to the same level of deep focus, and sometimes it never gets back there at all during that session. You're essentially lowering the intensity of the neuroplastic window. The very thing that enables you to learn and retain new information is being switched off every time your attention breaks. This is why true deep work requires environmental control. You need to engineer your surroundings to protect your brain's chemical state. That means silencing notifications, turning off unnecessary tabs, putting your phone in another room, anything that removes the opportunity for interruption. This isn't about being obsessive. It's about respecting the biology of your brain. Focus is not limitless. The systems that support it operate in cycles, typically 90-minute ultradian rhythms. During those periods, your brain can enter deep attentional states if you protect the chemical balance. If you fragment that state with distractions, you never access the full power of that cycle. You might feel busy, but you're not learning at the neurobiological level. Think of your brain like a lens. With focused neurochemistry, the lens is sharp and clear. Each bit of information passes through and is imprinted deeply. But with distraction, the lens fogs up, the signal weakens, the data gets lost. So if you want to learn faster, not just grind harder, protect the chemistry of focus. Create space where your brain can do what it's built to do: select, strengthen, and store. Distraction isn't just a nuisance. It's a neurochemical disruption, and it's costing you the very plasticity you're working so hard to achieve. There's a powerful rhythm running underneath your entire day, one that determines when your brain is most capable of deep focus, alertness, and learning. It's called the ultradian cycle, and it lasts about 90 minutes. Most people don't know it's happening, but if you understand and align with it, you can drastically improve how fast and effectively you learn at any age. Here's how it works. Throughout the day, your brain and body move through cycles of heightened alertness, followed by dips in energy. These ultradian rhythms are not random. They're tied to fundamental oscillations in your nervous system. During the high points of the cycle, usually about 90 minutes in duration, your brain enters a state of enhanced cognitive function. Attention sharpens, memory systems become more active, and the neurochemicals that drive focus and plasticity, acetylcholine, norepinephrine, and dopamine, are naturally elevated. These 90-minute windows are biological gold for learning. This is when your brain is most primed to receive, process, and encode information. Trying to push beyond these cycles, sitting for hours without breaks, works against your biology. You hit diminishing returns, mental fatigue sets in, and the very circuits you're trying to strengthen start losing efficiency. Instead, structure your work or study sessions in 90-minute blocks. During that time, go all in. No multitasking, no background noise, full focus. Because when you commit to a single task during this peak window, your brain engages the exact neurochemical state required for plasticity to occur. You're not just getting through the material, you're embedding it. At the end of the 90 minutes, you'll feel a natural dip in energy or focus. That's not failure. It's your brain completing the cycle. This is the moment to step away. Rest for 10 to 30 minutes. Let the brain consolidate what it just took in. Then when the next wave of energy rises, you ride it again. Some people may only get 1 or 2 high-quality cycles a day. Others may be able to do 3. But the key isn't quantity. It's alignment. It's matching your deepest focus periods with the brain's built-in performance rhythms. That's how elite learners operate, whether they realize it or not. They're not burning out. They're tuning in. This approach also prevents cognitive overload. When you push beyond the natural 90-minute window, cortisol, the stress hormone, starts to rise, attention fragments, and the brain shifts out of the learning state. So if you're trying to force productivity all day long, you're missing the point. It's not about endurance, it's about precision. When you work with your rhythms, not against them, learning becomes less about grind and more about timing. You hit your flow state more often. You retain more with less effort. And over time, the compounding effect of this biological alignment is massive. Learning faster doesn't require superhuman effort. It requires biological strategy. And that starts with respecting the rhythms your brain was built to follow. If you want to learn faster and retain more, whether you're a student, a professional, or just someone trying to grow, then movement can't be an afterthought. Light physical activity isn't just good for your body. It has a direct, measurable impact on how your brain encodes and consolidates information. Movement primes your brain for learning, and it reinforces what you've already learned. So let's break that down. First, consider what happens during movement. Even a light walk, cycling at an easy pace, or a few minutes of stretching triggers a cascade of brain activity. Blood flow increases, oxygen delivery to the brain improves, but more importantly, movement stimulates the release of several key neurochemicals, especially brain-directed neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. BDNF is often referred to as fertilizer for the brain. It supports the growth and survival of neurons and strengthens the synaptic connections between them. In simple terms, BDNF makes it easier for your brain to change, to adapt, and to store new information. Second, physical movement activates the hippocampus, which is the brain's primary memory center. Studies show that when movement is paired with learning, the hippocampus becomes more engaged and efficient. This means the information you're trying to learn has a greater chance of being encoded and transferred into long-term memory. It's not about intensity, just the presence of movement. Here's what the data shows. Students who take short walks before or after studying perform better on tests. People who move while learning new material, like listening to a podcast during a walk, retain more. Why? Because movement enhances alertness, increases dopamine and norepinephrine, and facilitates neuroplasticity, the very conditions under which the brain can change. There's also a timing factor. Light physical activity immediately after focused learning helps consolidate memory. That's because movement supports a form of neural replay, where your brain revisits the patterns of activity that occurred during learning. Think of it like sealing in the lesson with a layer of neurochemical reinforcement. Without that, the learning is more fragile. It fades. But with movement, it gets locked in. This doesn't mean you need to train like an athlete. In fact, intense exercise right after learning can sometimes interfere with consolidation because of elevated cortisol. What we're talking about here is light, rhythmic movement, something sustainable like a 20-minute walk or a few minutes of low-impact mobility. This is especially effective in the hours following a deep focus session, when your brain is in a receptive state for consolidation. So if you're building a learning routine, don't leave movement out. Place it strategically before to boost focus or after to enhance retention. Learning doesn't just happen in the brain. It's an embodied process. Your nervous system is integrated with your musculature, your cardiovascular system, your breath. When the body moves, the brain listens. To learn faster at any age moves smarter, not just for your health, but for your memory. If you want to learn faster, retain more, and perform at your cognitive best, you need to start thinking about light, not just as something you see, but as a signal that sets the rhythm for your entire brain and body. Specifically, morning sunlight and your circadian rhythm play a central role in determining how ready your brain is to focus, absorb, and adapt. Your brain operates on a roughly 24-hour internal clock. This circadian rhythm regulates everything from your alertness and mood to hormone release, metabolism, and critically learning capacity. And the single most powerful controller of this clock is light exposure, especially from natural sunlight early in the day. When you get sunlight in your eyes within the first 30 to 60 minutes after waking, preferably outdoors, not through a window, you send a signal directly to a part of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. That signal does two essential things. First, it sets the timer for your circadian rhythm, which means your brain will start producing alertness chemicals like cortisol and dopamine in the proper amounts and at the right times. Second, it aligns your mental energy curve so that your peak focus and performance windows arrive when you need them, especially during the mid-morning and early afternoon. This isn't just about feeling awake. This is about setting the conditions for neuroplasticity. The ability to learn and change your brain is heavily influenced by your internal timing. When your circadian rhythm is aligned, you naturally enter a state of heightened alertness in the early part of the day. Your brain is more responsive to stimulation, your attention is more stable, and the neuromodulators that make learning possible, like acetylcholine and norepinephrine, are released more reliably. Disrupt this rhythm by staying up late under artificial light, by waking inconsistently, or by skipping morning sunlight, and your brain doesn't know what time it is. Alertness arrives late or not at all. Focus feels forced. Your learning system is out of sync. It's like trying to train during the wrong phase of your sleep cycle, inefficient and frustrating. On the other hand, when you build the habit of getting sunlight early, ideally for 5 to 15 minutes, depending on cloud cover, you're training your biology to work with you, not against you. You're anchoring your circadian rhythm and telling your brain, now is the time to focus, to learn, to grow. You'll find that your ability to absorb new information, solve problems, and stay mentally engaged improves dramatically just by locking in this one behavior. This is not about morning people or motivation, it's biology. Your brain expects light in the morning, and when it gets it, the entire cognitive system functions better. Learning becomes faster, not because you're working harder, but because your brain is operating at its natural peak. The fastest learners don't fight their biology, they sync with it. And the first step in that process is getting sunlight in your eyes as early as possible. Most people think learning happens during the work, when you're reading, listening, practicing, or studying. But the truth is, you don't really learn until you sleep. Sleep isn't the absence of effort. It's a core part of the learning process. If you're not sleeping well, you're not learning well, period. Let's get precise. When you engage in focused learning, say you're studying a concept, practicing a new skill, or absorbing complex information, you're activating specific neural circuits. That activity is supported by neurochemicals like acetylcholine, which mark those circuits as important, making them eligible for change. But that's only the encoding phase. The actual storage and strengthening of those neural connections happens afterward. During sleep, sleep is when your brain performs memory consolidation. It takes the fragile traces of information you lay down during the day and replays, reorganizes, and strengthens them. Entire circuits that were lit up during learning get reactivated while you sleep, especially during a phase called slow wave sleep, which dominates the early part of the night. This is the deep non-REM sleep that's critical for factual learning and motor skill development. Later in the night, you transition into REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep. This is when the brain integrates what you've learned, connects it to past experiences, and even extracts patterns or insights. It's where creativity, problem solving, and emotional learning are shaped. So if you're skipping sleep or getting fragmented, poor all quality sleep, you're losing both the stabilization of knowledge and the integration that turns knowledge into understanding. And it's not just total hours that matter. The timing and consistency of your sleep are just as critical. The brain and body operate on a circadian rhythm, a roughly 24-hour clock. When you go to sleep and wake up at regular times, your brain knows when to activate these deep learning processes. But if you shift your sleep schedule constantly or get poor quality rest due to screens, caffeine, or late night stress, you throw that system off. Learning gets weaker, less efficient, and more easily forgotten. There's even evidence from EEG and fMRI studies showing that people who get quality sleep after studying outperform those who stay up late trying to cram. Not just slightly, significantly, because sleep isn't passive. It's a biological upgrade to everything you practiced. In fact, pulling an all-nighter after learning is like hitting delete on the progress you made. No matter how focused your effort was during the day, if you don't sleep, the brain treats that information as irrelevant. It doesn't get stored. It doesn't. So if you're serious about learning, if you want your time and focus to mean something, you need to protect your sleep like your progress depends on it. Because it does. Learning isn't complete until the brain has had a chance to replay, refine, and reinforce. And that only happens during high-quality sleep. So if you want to learn faster at any age, you don't need hacks or shortcuts. You need to work with your biology, not against it. Deep focus lights up the circuits of change. Deliberate rest locks those circuits in. Protecting your attention, aligning with your brain's natural rhythms, moving your body, getting morning sunlight, and sleeping well. These aren't lifestyle tips. They are levers for plasticity. Your brain is not fixed. It's a dynamic, adaptable system. But it only rewires itself when the conditions are right. Set the conditions. Show up with intention. And your brain will do what it was designed to do. Learn, grow, and change at any stage of life.